I first met Jessica at a charity gala in downtown Chicago. I was there representing my architecture firm, which had been commissioned to design the venue for the next year. She caught my eye immediately, elegant, in a blue dress that complemented her blonde hair perfectly. I was 29, a hardworking architect from a blue-collar family. She was 26, sophisticated and captivating. When we started talking, the connection was instant. I had no idea that beneath her warm smile lay a family dynasty that would eventually try to destroy me. What I also could not have predicted was how their wealth, power, and prenuptial demands would lead to betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately her desperate pleas for reconciliation. Before I continue this emotional journey, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever experienced relationship betrayal that left you questioning everything. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. My father worked construction his entire life while my mom juggled part-time jobs to help make ends meet. They taught me the value of hard work, honesty, and perseverance. Those principles guided me through college, where I studied architecture on scholarships and student loans. By 29, I had established myself as a promising architect at Walker Design Associates, known for my innovative approaches and dedication to sustainable building practices. My life changed forever on that April evening at the Thompson Foundation Gala. I was discussing potential designs with the foundation director when Jessica appeared beside us, introducing herself as a fashion consultant for several high-profile charities. She wore no flashy jewelry, just simple elegance and a genuine smile that made me forget my rehearsed professional pitch. Our first conversation lasted 2 hours. We talked about everything from our favorite Chicago neighborhoods to our dreams for the future. Jessica mentioned she worked for a luxury fashion brand, but spoke little about her family, only saying they were comfortable. I appreciated her apparent modesty and focus on her own career achievements rather than family connections. We exchanged numbers, and I called her the next day. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park. Nothing fancy, but with excellent food. Jessica seemed perfectly content there, complimenting the authentic atmosphere and homemade pasta. She laughed when I nervously admitted I had researched the place thoroughly to impress her. Over the next 8 months, our relationship blossomed into something I had never experienced before. We explored the city together, attended jazz festivals, and spent quiet evenings discussing books and films. Jessica was intelligent, funny, and seemingly down to earth. She never complained about the modest places we frequented or showed interest in materialistic things. I was falling deeply in love with her, believing I had found someone who valued substance over status. The first hint that Jessica had been concealing something significant came when she finally invited me to a family dinner. She seemed unusually nervous, warning me that her parents could be judgmental, but assuring me they would love me once they got to know me. I assumed they might be somewhat affluent, perhaps doctors or lawyers, but nothing prepared me for what I encountered. As my Uber approached the address Jessica had provided, I stared in disbelief. It was not a house, but an estate in the most exclusive part of Lake Forest, with a gated entrance and manicured grounds that seemed to stretch for acres. A uniformed staff member greeted me at the door, taking my coat and leading me through a foyer larger than my entire apartment. Jessica rushed to meet me, looking apologetic. In the soft lighting of the enormous hallway, she whispered, "I should have prepared you better. My family owns Hartwick Hotels International." The name hit me like a brick wall. Hartwick Hotels was one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the world. I had designed small projects for boutique hotels, but Hartwick was in another league entirely, with properties in every major city globally. I was not just meeting her parents. I was meeting one of the wealthiest families in America. William and Linda Hartwick stood waiting in a living room that resembled a museum. William, tall and imposing in his 60s, barely acknowledged my handshake. Linda, elegantly dressed with perfectly coiffed silver hair, assessed me with a cold stare that made me acutely aware of my department store suit. The dinner that followed was an excruciating experience. William questioned my career prospects, while Linda inquired about my family background, in a tone that suggested she was conducting an unpleasant but necessary investigation. Jessica attempted to highlight my accomplishments and character, but her parents seemed unimpressed by anything that did not include significant financial success or social connections. When I mentioned growing up in South Chicago, Linda visibly recoiled. William interrupted to ask what my annual income was, as if it were as casual as asking about the weather. Before I could answer, he stated the approximate value of their summer home in Martha's Vineyard, which exceeded my lifetime earning potential. Driving home that night, Jessica was quiet before finally breaking the silence. "I am so sorry, Anthony. They were horrible to you, and it is inexcusable." She explained that her family had always been protective, especially after her older sister had a relationship with someone who later attempted to extort money from the family. I assured Jessica that I loved her for who she was, not her family wealth. I emphasized this point over the following weeks by refusing expensive gifts she offered and insisting on paying my share of our dates. I wanted to make it clear that my intentions were pure both to her and eventually to her skeptical family. Despite my efforts, I noticed subtle changes in Jessica. She began canceling our regular dinner dates for family business events. When we did meet, she would occasionally comment on friends from her social circle who were dating successful hedge fund managers or tech entrepreneurs. Once, after I proudly showed her a design that had been approved for a community center, she smiled politely before asking why I did not pursue more lucrative commercial projects instead. These moments were like small paper cuts to my confidence, but I dismissed them as minor concerns. Then came the conversation that would change everything. Over dinner at my apartment, Jessica nervously informed me that if our relationship was to progress toward marriage, her family would require a prenuptial agreement. She quickly added that it was just a formality, a standard procedure for anyone marrying into the Hartwick family, and would not affect our relationship at all. The prenuptial agreement arrived via courier the following week. It was not just a document, but a thick folder of legal papers that required my signature on multiple pages. I took it to a friend who worked in legal consulting, though I could not afford a high-powered attorney like the Hartwicks had clearly employed. My friend whistled as he flipped through the pages. "This is brutal, Anthony. According to these terms, you would have no right to any Hartwick family assets or business interests. Any property Jessica owned before your marriage would remain exclusively hers. In the event of divorce, you would receive only a fixed sum of $100,000, regardless of the marriage duration. There are also clauses limiting your financial claims even if you have children together." The stark reality of what this meant hit me hard. The prenup effectively stated that I was not trusted and viewed as a potential gold digger rather than a life partner. It reduced our relationship to a transaction where my value was predetermined and limited. When I confronted Jessica, our first serious argument erupted. I felt demeaned and questioned whether her family would ever see me as anything but a financial liability. Jessica tearfully explained that she had fought against many of the terms, but her father had been adamant. If she wanted to remain in the family and eventually take her place in the business, she had to protect their assets according to their terms. Then came the ultimatum. Either I signed the prenup, or Jessica would be disinherited and cut off from her family. She cried as she told me how torn she felt between her love for me and her lifelong relationship with her parents. Despite her wealth and confident exterior, I saw vulnerability as she faced potentially losing her entire support system. I spent weeks agonizing over the decision, torn between my pride and my love for Jessica. I consulted friends who were divided in their advice. Some said walking away was the only option to preserve my dignity. Others suggested that if I truly loved her, I should sign and prove the relationship was about love, not money. After much soul-searching, I decided to sign. I convinced myself that our love would overcome these legal barriers and that over time I would prove my worth to her family. The day I signed the prenup was surreal. In a conference room at the Hartwick corporate headquarters, surrounded by their legal team, I scrawled my signature on page after page. William's satisfied smirk and Linda's cold approval made my stomach turn, but Jessica's grateful squeeze of my hand gave me hope. 6 months later, we were married in an extravagant ceremony at the flagship Hartwick Hotel in Chicago. The guest list included over 500 people, most of whom I had never met. Business associates, social connections, and family friends of the Hartwicks filled the ballroom, while my side consisted of a small gathering of friends and family who looked overwhelmed by the opulence. Our wedding night, Jessica whispered that she was proud of me for being so gracious throughout the day, particularly when her father gave a toast that subtly emphasized the importance of the Hartwick legacy rather than our relationship. I swallowed my discomfort, focusing instead on building our future. I had purchased a comfortable condominium in a developing neighborhood with my savings refusing Jessica's offer to use family money for a more lavish home. I wanted to establish our life together, on my terms, in a home I could afford. Initially, Jessica seemed charmed by what she called my independence and integrity. That charm wore off quickly. 3 months into our marriage, Jessica began complaining about the size of our kitchen, the lack of a doorman, and the neighborhood which she deemed up and coming but not quite there. She started spending more time at her parents' estate, claiming she needed the space to spread out her fashion design materials. Our financial discussions became increasingly tense. Jessica had access to trust funds and family money that made my architect's salary seem insignificant. When I suggested budgeting for a vacation, she laughed and offered to just put it on her family account. When I refused, she accused me of having a pride problem that was limiting our experiences together. Around this time, I reconnected with Jackson Wright, an old college friend who had moved back to Chicago after building a successful tech company in Silicon Valley. I was excited to introduce him to Jessica, thinking his entrepreneurial success might impress her while his knowledge of the real me might help bridge the gap between my past and present life. The dinner with Jackson went surprisingly well. Too well in retrospect. Jessica was unusually animated, asking detailed questions about his business and expressing admiration for his risk-taking approach. Jackson, single and known for his appreciation of beautiful women, responded with equal enthusiasm. I was pleased to see them getting along, naively interpreting their rapport as a good sign for integrating my old friends into our married life. Jackson quickly became a regular presence in our social calendar. Whenever he suggested an outing, Jessica was immediately available, even canceling other plans to accommodate. When I mentioned finding this odd, she dismissed my concern, saying she was just being supportive of my friendships. Then came the text messages. I noticed Jessica guarding her phone more carefully, angling it away when I entered the room. One evening, while she was showering, a notification from Jackson lit up her screen. Just a glimpse showed me the words, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow when A is at work." When confronted, Jessica laughed it off. "Anthony, you are being ridiculous. Jackson is helping me plan your birthday surprise. That is all. He knows the best restaurants since he entertains clients all the time." She kissed me and changed the subject, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I began noticing other changes. Jessica was suddenly interested in her appearance in ways that seemed beyond her usual fashion consciousness. New lingerie appeared in her drawer, yet our intimate life had become increasingly infrequent. She started having regular spa days and lunch meetings that were vaguely explained. The patterns were textbook, but I desperately wanted to believe my suspicions were unfounded. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday in October. I was supposed to be in Milwaukee for a 2-day client meeting, but the client had a family emergency, postponing our second day. Rather than staying overnight as planned, I drove back to Chicago thinking I might surprise Jessica with dinner. Instead, I was the one surprised. As I pulled into the parking garage of the Four Seasons Hotel to turn around, I spotted Jessica's distinctive red Tesla in a reserved space. My stomach dropped. Jackson had mentioned staying at this hotel temporarily while his new penthouse was being renovated. I should have driven away. Part of me knew what I would find, and that knowledge alone should have been enough. But I needed to see it with my own eyes to eliminate any possibility of misunderstanding. I parked and entered the hotel, a place where the Hartwick name would open any door. At the reception desk, I mentioned being there to surprise my friend Jackson Wright. The concierge, recognizing the Hartwick connection from previous visits with Jessica, smiled knowingly and directed me to the executive suite on the 35th floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. Each floor brought me closer to a truth I did not want to face. Standing outside suite 3507, I hesitated, then knocked firmly. Silence followed, then hushed voices. When the door finally opened, Jackson stood there in a hotel robe, surprise, and then guilt washing over his face. I did not wait for an invitation. I pushed past him to find Jessica emerging from the bedroom area, wearing only a man's dress shirt. I recognized as one I had helped Jackson select months earlier. Her shock quickly transformed into defiance. I expected denial. Instead, Jessica crossed her arms and said, "You were not supposed to be back until tomorrow." The casual callousness of her response was like being doused with ice water. No apologies, no shame, just annoyance at being discovered. The argument that followed was ugly and revealing. When I demanded to know how long this had been going on, Jessica admitted to seeing Jackson for nearly 4 months, almost half of our marriage. When I asked why, her answer cut deeper than any knife could. "Because he can give me the life I deserve without making me feel guilty about it," she said coldly. "Because he understands my world. Because I do not have to pretend to be impressed by his little accomplishments or watch him count pennies while planning vacations." Jackson attempted to interject with apologies, claiming it had started innocently and gotten out of hand. I silenced him with one question. "How could you do this? To someone who considered you a friend?" His pathetic response, "It just happened," confirmed he was as worthless as she was. I announced I wanted a divorce immediately. That was when Jessica's expression changed from defiance to something more calculating. "Go ahead," she smiled thinly. "You signed the prenup, remember? You will get your $100,000, which will not even cover your legal fees if you try to fight me. And if you make this messy, Daddy will make sure you never work on another major project in this city again." In that moment, looking at her smug certainty, something broke and reformed inside me. I walked out without another word, ignoring their calls, as I rode the elevator down. In my car, I unleashed the primal scream that had been building in my chest, then drove home in a state of numb clarity. When I arrived at our condo, I discovered Jessica had already been busy. Several valuable items were missing, including artwork she had insisted on buying and jewelry I had saved for months to purchase for her. A quick check confirmed she had also transferred most of our joint checking account to her private account, leaving me with barely enough to cover next month's expenses. The following morning, a courier delivered a letter from the Hartwick family attorney. It outlined the terms under which they expected our divorce to proceed, essentially demanding I walk away with nothing beyond the prenup amount, sign extensive non-disclosure agreements, and make no claims against Jessica or Jackson. The implied threat was clear: defy these terms and they would crush me professionally and financially. I had never felt so alone or hopeless. Then I remembered something crucial. During one of the many prenup discussions, Jessica had insisted on a mutual fidelity clause, claiming it would prove to her parents that our marriage was about love and commitment, not money. The clause stated that in case of proven infidelity, the prenup would be invalidated, and standard divorce proceedings would apply. At the time, I had seen it as a beautiful gesture of her commitment. Now it was my one advantage. During our confrontation at the hotel, I had activated the voice recording function on my phone, capturing her explicit admission of the affair, its duration, and even Jackson's confirming statements. With renewed determination, I contacted David Simmons, a tough divorce attorney known for taking on powerful opponents. When I explained my situation and played the recording, his eyes lit up. "This is gold, Anthony. Pure gold." Over the next weeks, the Hartwicks launched their expected offensive. William used connections to have me removed from major projects at my firm. Linda spread rumors in social circles about my supposed emotional instability and controlling behavior. Jessica filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, expecting me to quietly accept their terms. Instead, they received my counterfiling with the infidelity clause prominently featured and references to the evidence in my possession. The Hartwick legal team immediately demanded a private meeting, which David and I attended with quiet confidence. Their lead attorney, a silver-haired man who had likely never lost a case, pushed a settlement offer across the table without preamble. $2 million and a letter of recommendation to any architecture firm in the country in exchange for my silence and the recording. I slid it back untouched. Not interested. Their shock was visible. The Hartwicks were not accustomed to refusal. The attorney tried again, doubling the offer and adding connections to international firms. Again, I declined. David then outlined our terms. A fair divorce settlement, according to state laws without the prenup restrictions, public acknowledgement of the true reason for our divorce, and a non-interference agreement that would prevent the Hartwicks from sabotaging my career. When they balked, David simply stood and said, "Then we will see you in court, where this recording will become public record." The scandal would affect not just their daughter's reputation, but potentially their hotel brand associated with family values. 2 days later, they accepted our terms. The legal battle lasted 6 grueling months. but eventually I prevailed. The court invalidated the prenup based on the infidelity clause and the irrefutable evidence. I received a fair settlement that, while not making me wealthy by Hartwick standards, provided financial security and vindication. More importantly, the truth became known among our social and professional circles. Jackson's reputation suffered significantly, with several investors pulling out of his company citing character concerns. The Hartwicks faced uncomfortable questions at charity galas, and business functions their carefully cultivated image tarnished. The aftermath was both challenging and transformative. For weeks after the settlement, I struggled with insomnia and trust issues. The betrayal by both my wife and close friend had left deep scars that would not heal overnight. Some mornings I would wake up feeling hollow, wondering how I could have been so blind to the truth of my relationship. I threw myself into work initially, taking on demanding projects that required total focus. My boss, understanding the situation better than most, assigned me to a sustainable housing development that had been my dream project for years. The complex challenges of balancing environmental impact, community needs, and aesthetic beauty provided a healthy distraction from my personal turmoil. Gradually, I allowed myself to process the pain rather than just escape it. I joined a support group for people healing from betrayal, where I found others with surprisingly similar stories. There was comfort in knowing I was not alone, that my experience, though painful, was not unique. Through these connections, I learned valuable tools for emotional healing and rebuilding self-trust. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Jessica stood in the doorway, looking different than I remembered. Gone was the designer wardrobe, and perfect makeup replaced by a simpler style and tired eyes. She asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I agreed to coffee in the public cafe downstairs. "Anthony, I have made the biggest mistake of my life," she began, tears forming. "Jackson left me for a venture capitalist who can fund his new startup. My parents are furious about the scandal affecting hotel bookings in our most conservative markets. I have been such a fool. I never appreciated what we had, what you offered me that was real and genuine." She reached for my hand across the table. "I still love you. I always did, even when I was too blind to see it. We could start over, make it right this time. No prenup, no interference from my family. Just us." For a brief moment, I felt a pull toward the fantasy of reconciliation, of proving that love could overcome such betrayal. Then I looked into her eyes and saw not remorse for hurting me, but fear of facing consequences. She was not there for me, but for the security and comfort I represented now that her other options had disappeared. I gently withdrew my hand. "Jessica, what we had is gone. It did not end when you cheated. It ended each time you made me feel less than because I was not born into wealth. It ended when you valued status over character. It ended when you threatened to destroy my career rather than face your own actions." Her tears turned to anger, then accusations that I was being vindictive and unforgiving. I realized that even now she did not truly see me or understand what she had done. I wished her well and walked away feeling lighter with each step. That conversation marked a turning point in my healing. Using part of my settlement, I launched my own small architecture firm, focusing on sustainable urban renewal projects. Starting small allowed me to be selective about clients and partners, building a reputation for integrity and innovation rather than chasing money or prestige. The business grew steadily, and within a year I was competing for projects against major firms, including ones that designed for Hartwick hotels. My signature aesthetic began appearing in architecture magazines, and my community-based approach earned recognition from industry leaders who valued substance over flash. My personal life also found new direction. Through a volunteer project designing a kindergarten classroom, I met Sophia, an elementary school teacher, whose passion for education matched my passion for architecture. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest communication and shared values rather than superficial attraction or social benefits. Sophia knew my story and understood my hesitation to trust again. She never pushed for more than I was ready to give, but her consistent authenticity gradually helped me rebuild faith in relationships. When she received a modest inheritance from her grandfather and immediately established a scholarship fund for her students rather than upgrading her lifestyle, I recognized the kind of partner I truly needed, someone whose character, remained constant, regardless of circumstances. Today, 2 years after the divorce, my life bears little resemblance to what it was during my marriage. My firm has 12 employees and a portfolio of projects that make me proud. I bought a historic building in an emerging neighborhood and renovated it into a combination of my office living space and affordable units for artists. Most importantly, I rediscovered my self-respect and purpose beyond seeking approval from others. I occasionally hear about Jessica through mutual acquaintances. Her family weathered the scandal, as the ultra-wealthy usually do, though their reputation required extensive PR rehabilitation. She eventually started dating the son of another hotel magnate, a strategic match that made the business pages. I wish her no ill will, only the wisdom to recognize genuine happiness when she finds it. The greatest lesson from my journey was understanding that true value cannot be measured in prenuptial terms or bank accounts. Real wealth lies in authenticity in relationships that elevate rather than diminish, and in the courage to stand up for your worth when others try to discount it. Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead us exactly where we need to be, forcing us to rebuild on foundations that can actually support the lives we deserve. Would you have signed that prenup if you were in my situation? Or would you have walked away before the wedding? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming betrayal and finding strength. Thank you for listening. And remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's assessment, only by your belief in yourself.